Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on our fourth webinar organized as part of the Maya Living Legacy Lecture Series. This is an interdepartmental effort at the University of Wisconsin that centers on Maya culture, and you can find more information about this Maya series here in this chat that we are sharing right now. We would like to thank the generous support and contributions of the following units who are making this lecture series feasible. LACIS, Latin American, Caribbean, and Iberian Studies, the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, the Agroecology program, the Department of Plant and Agroecosystem Sciences, Science and Technology Studies, and Language Sciences at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We are thrilled to have today a distinguished lecturer and good friend. Let us introduce him right now. Francisco Rosado May is a Yucatec Maya with a PhD in biology from the University of California, Santa Cruz, with an emphasis on agroecology. He has been working in higher education for about 40 years, and in the last 15 years, he has been paying more attention to indigenous food systems, especially in the Yucatan, with the idea to understand the thinking that drives the design and management of sustainable indigenous food systems. And he's looking for ways that this information can be of significant use to transform broken food systems, whether they are indigenous or not. Francisco is the founding president of Universidad Intercultural Maya de Quintana Roo, where an intercultural educational model was successfully developed for Yucatec Maya students. And he continues working there since 2007. Francisco has a wealth of research and scholarship that we invite you all to dig further. And without taking more of his time, Francisco, welcome and thank you so much for your time and for joining this lecture series. And this virtual space is now yours. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Claudia, for such a nice introduction. Thank you for inviting me to share some of my experiences with this wonderful group. Thank you, Kata, for the invitation as well. And let's start with the topic. We're going to talk about the GIAHS, how the Milpa Maya got into this recognition from FAO, and ways to think ahead. Okay, something is going on. I can't move. Here we go. Do you see my screen?
Yes, it's perfectly.
Great. Okay, cool. Okay. So on May 22nd, two young milperos, Yucatec Maya milperos, farmers, went to Rome and got from the general director of FAO this award, which given to them, and they were representing the Yucatec Maya people, and work that was done together with scientists to get the Milpa Maya, which in Maya is called, each call is not Milpa. You see this document. It says each call Milpa Maya. The two people who went there, Jesus Podya is our university former student, and Miguel Kubalam is a well-known person. Kata also met him last month when she came for one of our meetings on co-creation of knowledge. Anyway, this happened on the 22nd of May, not too long ago. And GIAHS, globally important agricultural heritage systems, is defined by FAO with keywords. They are agroecosystems. They are communities are involved in the design and management of those agroecosystems. Therefore, there is an intricate relationship between the people and their territory. These systems are resilient. They have a remarkable agrobiodiversity. They also represent a huge synthesis of traditional knowledge, culture, and are part of the landscape. For FAO, it is important when they grant the recognition of GIAHS to a system is that those systems contribute to the livelihood and food security of those communities. So this is our point of reference. All of the sites, GIAHS sites, have to comply with this definition. And by the way, I'm presenting every time I use concepts or something that I think is important, I present also the source of information where you can access and dig more on the subject. Anyway, GIAHS started in 2002, 22 years ago, basically. And now in 2023, last year, there were 89 sites in 29 countries. This year, 13 new sites are waiting for final decisions, and 2 countries are new to this process, Cuba and the Russian Federation. So with 12 years of experience, these globally important agricultural heritage systems have done the following. In regards to the Yucatec Maya food system, that's the system that got the award, the recognition of FAO. And here you have 3 slides showing the 3 sisters. The Milpa Maya, the Kool, which Milpa, by the way, is a word that doesn't come from the Maya. It comes from the Aztecs. It comes from the Nahuatl language. For the Maya, the word is Kool. Ich means fruit. Kool means the result of my work that I do with the forest. So a Milpa Maya is also an agroforestry system. And what we harvest is the result, is the fruit of the work that I do in my connection to the system, to the forest, to the natural resources. That's all in these 2 words, each Kool. And most of the literature and most of the people, when they talk about the Milpa Maya, they talk about 3 species. They are actually known as the 3 sisters: maize, beans, and squash. However, there is research that shows that in the milpas, in the Yucatec Maya milpas, up to 50 edible species can be found. Most of them are farmed by the farmers. Some of them just naturally occur, but most of them are part of the whole system that usually are not visible because we only pay attention to the 3 sisters. In order for a system to get the recognition of FAO as a globally important agricultural heritage system, they have to meet 5 criteria and 1 other element, which is called the action plan. The first criteria has to do with food and livelihood security. So the research that sustains the proposal of having a system presented to FAO to be considered this heritage system has to demonstrate that the system plays an important role in food security and livelihood for the people who work on that system. And we do that by measuring the yields and by measuring the amount of consumption of each of the yields, the use of the species grown in the milpa, and how much the people of X, Y community bring food from different communities or even different states. So if the milpa in at least most of the communities supply not less than 80 or 70% of the demand of the food, then it qualifies for the food and livelihood security. The second criteria is agrobiodiversity. And it is important to know that FAO defines agrobiodiversity as follows, and this is the definition in quotation marks. It's basically, it has to do with everything that is on an area, which is crops, plants, animals, insects. If there is a water management area, like a river or a pond, we also include all those parts of the structure of those ecosystems as part of the biodiversity. The point is that when presenting a proposal to have a system recognized by FAO, we have to list the number of species and, if possible, the role of each of those species in the system. Third criteria is that the system has to reflect local and traditional knowledge. And in the case of the milpa, well, it basically evolved with the culture, and the culture, depending on the author that you read, is 3,000-4,000 years old. So the milpa is, of course, didn't start when the culture started in the very early years of the culture, but it didn't take that long. When the culture started to settle in some places, they settled with the milpa. So back then, in thousands of years ago, there was no science. There was all knowledge that was created by the local community. So there is no doubt that there is local knowledge behind the sustainability of the Milpa Maya when it's managed properly. Number four, cultures, value systems, and social organization. This criteria has to do with how people in the communities make decisions. How is the governance? How is the structure of the community in such a way that there is a value shared, there is a social organization, which explains also the design and management of the system. And FAO goes on and says social organization is defined as individuals, families, groups, or communities. It's all involved there. It's a high-level system of governance. The next criteria, number 5, is landscape and seascape features. Now, this criteria is very interesting in the region. In the case of the Milpa Maya, probably Annabelle Ford mentioned that the Milpa blends with the landscape. In fact, the management of the Milpa through the slash and burning process of it, with time, the actual natural aspect of the forest is the result of human intervention. It's not 100% natural. It's the result of human intervention because of the slash and burn. And according to literature, the practice of slash and burning agriculture, which is intrinsic to the Yucatec Maya milpa, explains the higher retention of carbon in areas where the Milpa Maya is properly managed compared to areas where there is no Milpa Maya. In other words, the system evolved in such a way that it captures much more carbon than the carbon that is burned in the burning process. And the last part of the criteria for granting the recognition of global heritage system is an action plan for sustainability. And this is the most difficult part, which this means that the people who got together to propose this site for as a heritage system to the world had to make sure that they have a plan to keep the system alive, sustainable, and of course not static or dynamic, but in the essence of the 5 criteria mentioned before, they have to still meet those 5 criteria. So this is the difficult part, and this is what the people in the Yucatec in the Yucatan are struggling with. There were only a few research institutions involved in the initial process of presenting the Milpa Maya to FAO, and now they see the need of having more interaction with research institutions like universities. They see the need of having a much better interface of policy and knowledge, which means that involving the government is critical so that the policies of management of food systems in the 3 states of the Yucatan Peninsula are also aligned, or at least they give room to the Milpa to keep the essence, the 5 criteria of FAO. And of course, there is a monitoring process. This process of once a group of people present the intention of a system to be considered by FAO, they may take from 3 to 5 years to actually have the approval of FAO, if assuming that all criteria are met. And that means that there has to be research presented, there has to be validated that research. People from FAO come to the area and check and talk to the people, check the data, check the facts, talk to the people, and so on. At least 2 visits, etc. For the Milpa Maya, the discussion, depending on when the process started, we can say that it took up to 5 years to actually get the recognition of FAO as a GIAHS system. Online, you can see the document, the actual document that was presented to FAO to obtain the approval of FAO. And this document was presented in March 2023. And it was in May, few months later, where FAO decided to grant the recognition to the Milpa Maya. That's where these 2 people went, representing the Yucatec Maya Milpa. Okay, and if you look at this this document, it's kind of thick. Lots of information is there, demonstrating that all 5 criteria and a working plan to sustain the recognition of the Milpa Maya as a heritage system is there. If it is important, I can describe some of the details, but if not, you can actually read this document and it's fairly well explained, the process. But let me show you one example of the importance of the Milpa and the result of the research that was behind this designation of Milpa as a heritage system. There was an article that was published in Science this year, August, just a few months ago. And the article was picked up by a journalist, Elizabeth Penisi, and entitled this article like this: "When maize screams, beans listen, how the 3 sisters crop trio repels pests." And it turns out that there's a group of researchers who was wondering how come we still find milpas in different parts of Mesoamerica, were no need of using pesticides. There is no need of using pesticides. What's going on in the system? Well, at this point of time, we know that plants produce secondary compounds, and there are different ways of those secondary compounds to be released in the environment. Some of those compounds are released through root exudates, and some other compounds are released through volatiles in the air, in the atmosphere. Well, it turns out that all plants form in their physiology these secondary compounds. Well, the beauty of this system is that because the corn is the crop that is more exposed to the environment, that's basically, not always, but usually, the first one to be attacked by pests. Well, corn then releases this volatile that is picked up by beans, and beans produce another chemical that attracts the natural enemies of the pests of the corn. And of course, there is some damage, but it's not any close to what agronomists call the economical umbrella. I forgot the name of English. There is a point in which the damage is economically important, and below that point, even though there is some damage by the pest, it's not economically important. So this threshold, the economical threshold, is kept in balance because there is a conversation, sort of saying, between the three species working together. And this is not happening just by any chance. This was part of the evolution, the cultural evolution, which these three plants were by the people were induced to have these properties, because there have been experiments trying to use different varieties of the same crop, but the result of the interaction is not the same. The interaction of this equilibrium only happens when there are varieties completely adapted to the different environments and in an area where there is milpa. Those of you who have been in a milpa area or a milpa community will notice that there are differences in types of soil, there are differences in humidity, there are differences in microclimates, etc. So each of them are properly adapted to the local conditions. And those adaptations lead these interactions of the three species. Of course, anything that breaks this balance makes this system unsustainable. And because there is this level of preservation, of conservation of the system, scientists have been able to explain what explains, in terms of pest control, the sustainability of corn. And this level of information, of course, this is 2024, was not out when the document was presented to FAO. However, in the document, there is enough information that leads to thinking that there are mechanisms in the system that explain the sustainability of the system. And that means weed control, look, there is no weeds here. Pest control, yes, we see some leaves of the beans with some holes, but nothing close to an economical importance threshold. And we don't see any problem with the leaves of the corn, except some few spots here and there. So in this process of having a plan to secure the permanence of the Xcol as a heritage system, at least in Mexico, the milperos, and of course we're talking about the Yucatan Peninsula here, which is the milpa that was recognized by FAO, but milpa is all over Mesoamerica. And this Mexican map shows the different dots in which indigenous populations are present. And there is a description of the most important indigenous groups, indigenous peoples in each of the states in the country. And what I have here in these blue dots is representing the states and approximately the areas in the state where there is an intercultural university. This is where we are. This is where my university is, in the state of Quintana Roo, close to the Yucatan and to the border with Campeche, this windrow. And right in the middle of a high population of Yucatec Maya people. The Yucatan Peninsula, with the three states, Campeche, Yucatan, and Quintana Roo, more or less share some sort of homogeneity in the culture. One of those things is the use of slash and burn. You can see Milpa in Veracruz, but not necessarily with slash and burn. You can see Milpa in Guerrero and other states, but not necessarily with slash and burn. It's much more controlled in Tabasco, for instance, or in Chiapas. But in Yucatan and Quintana Roo, we still do quite a bit of slash and burn agriculture. That's why the FAO granted the recognition of the Milpa Maya. That's what it's called. That's actually Yucatec Maya word that is only for the Yucatan Peninsula. But nevertheless, the point is that the Milpa is a system that was originated by indigenous people. You see the distribution of indigenous peoples in Mexico with these color dots, and you see where there is an intercultural university. If these intercultural universities, which I know they are doing, will do the same thing that we are doing here, working with the people who made possible the recognition of the Milpa Maya as FAO site, then there are very good possibilities that the recognition will stay for a long number of years, hopefully. But science has come along and joined the effort. There is this publication. I don't think I shared this publication with Cata and Claudia. I only shared the previous one. But there is the link where you can find it, where it turns out that the globally important agricultural heritage systems do have a scientific conceptual framework and strategic principles. And this publication was after the program was implemented, and they thought, well, maybe we have something beyond only the recognition. We have an opportunity for science not only to back up our decision of creating this program of globally important agricultural heritage systems, but also opening the opportunity to find information that can be used by similar systems around the world. And that's what's taking me to the next part of this conversation. I was thinking of putting forward two next steps with this GIAHS program. The heritage system sites represent different cultures, ecosystems, biomes, and knowledge systems around the world. Would there be a possibility to find out similar concepts from indigenous and local peoples driving their decisions and actions in their food systems? I mean, if there is a system that is recognized by after a strong evaluation by FAO, given the recognition, and if we find the principles or the knowledge behind that specific system, and if we do the same thing in another system, can we have similar principles? Could we find similar concepts? Can we find similar methods or similar thinking? And if we have different systems in different biomes, maybe we are at a position in which we can think just like science thinks of hypotheses or theories that go across different environments of different conditions. Maybe we can do the same thing in indigenous food systems. Now, the second thing that I would like to present, make more visible, is that in the case of the Yucatec Maya, there is too much emphasis, I think, on the Ichcol, on the Milpa. This emphasis could lead to a misunderstanding of the local concept of food system, and thus contribute to the extinction of other food sources and knowledge. Let me move into these two thoughts. To do so, it'll be important to find out where are the GIAHS systems located. And this table is taken from FAO. I forgot to have the source here, but we have a total of GIAHS sites of 89 in 23. 13 new sites are waiting for final decision. And these 89 sites represent 29 different countries also in the year 2003. I mean, 2023, I made a mistake here, I'm sorry. And only 2 more countries in 24 have the opportunity to join this group. So there will be 39 countries, which means for the Russian Federation and Cuba, they are the ones who are not on this list so far. All right, now we have regions, we have countries, and we have a number of sites. If I were to use a map that shows the biomes in the world, I chose this one. Here is the source. In colors, we see the different biomes of the world. A biome is an area, usually it's a large area, that shares the basic ecological conditions for life to happen on that area. So we have the tropical rainforest with light green. You see all the parts of the world with this color. We have the temperate forest, a little darker. Here in the US, you are basically around this temperate forest area, some part in the central part of Mexico, and some parts in Asia as well. And we have the desert in yellow, in orange, sorry, and so on. And what I did was I used the areas and located the countries and have a circle representing where on each biome I have heritage systems recognized by FAO. And look at this. We have only 5 of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of 10 biomes. I have GIAHS present in 5 of the biomes. Now, if I use another source of information, and here is the source, this paper was published in 2018, showing the distribution of land which has a strong indigenous influence, because most of the area is managed by indigenous people, and the darker the color is the higher the intensity of indigenous people living in that area. You see the distribution. You can actually see where we are missing heritage systems recognized by FAO, and where we have those ones recognized on what density of indigenous population. So I say that we have a pretty good representation. Has 50% of biomes have heritage systems recognized by FAO, food systems, and they are also present in more or less important density of indigenous population. So this came to my surprise. I just built this 2 or 3 days ago. I was thinking how to present this first thinking that I present. Sorry, this one. Do we have the possibility of finding out similar concepts from different people driving the decisions and actions? Yes, we do. Here we are. If we find similar principles, similar concepts behind the design and management of indigenous food systems in 5 biomes. And of course, they are indigenous. Here is the demonstration of it on the right side. Then we can come up with, now it's not just local knowledge. Of course, there is local knowledge important for local processes, but also local knowledge can be linked to other global principles or global concepts. And then we can also be closer to attend and to understand global issues such as climate change or loss of biodiversity. Now, I do not know of any research doing this type of work, finding out what are the things, what kind of thinking there is across different biomes from indigenous or local people. This is an area of to be researched. Now, let me move to the second question that I presented. In the case of the Yucatec Maya, too much emphasis on the milpa, on the each call, can lead to the extinction of other food sources and knowledge. Okay, let me say, if I had on this y-axis a representing the evolution through time of the Maya food systems, I would say that at the peak of the evolution, we will find a farmer, a family working with bees, working with milpa, working with livestock, working with different kind of livestock, working with the forest. I'm sure Annabelle Ford mentioned this also. Having a home garden, having a canche, and working with chicken, pigs, turkey, and also growing fruits and vegetables. I mean, this is a high level of complexity in which all of these are subsystems of the food system for the Yucatec Maya. And the Milpa Maya is only one of them. Of course, it's the more conspicuous one, but it's not the only one. Okay, and this is the understanding by the Maya. When they talk about food systems, they talk about everything that is related to food, all the sources of food that they have, not just the milpa. Now, I came up with this idea. If we have time, and I have on the other axis, Yucatec Maya food systems performance, we can see that the previous figure, this previous model at the peak of the evolution, is actually it's not flat. There is a dynamic equilibrium here. It doesn't go beyond limiting above or limiting below. It doesn't go beyond. It keeps an equilibrium there, and that's what it's called. That's what the Maya consider the sustainability. And we can find factors that explain this process. Until the substitution of the indigenous knowledge system happened heavily, and the system starts breaking the boundaries and going for trouble, moving from sustainability to unsustainability. Okay, and this is where the low production happens in the milpas and the other components of the food system, and this is where the government comes to rescue by bringing hybrids, by bringing fertilizer, by bringing pesticides. So what can we do about this? And this is the importance of GIAHS. Programs and policies can help to bring up this process of unsustainability to higher level of sustainability and even higher levels of production than the ones they used to be yesterday. And the support of this process has to come through intercultural co-creation of knowledge, through cooperation and the safe setting. It's a push-pull model. So push from the knowledge, which we have to understand that is good, solid knowledge, and we have to look for it, and we have to complemented with policy and governance and programs such as these heritage systems from FAO before it's too late. So the only way for the lots of work that led to the recognition of the Milpa Maya as a heritage system from FAO is to think of this process as in a more general basis that use fighting pests, fighting soil infertility, or fighting specific public policy of not using fire for the milpas, for instance. We need to have a broader vision of the issue. And I think that's it. Are we okay there?
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much.
I'm going to stop sharing now. Here we are.
Thank you very much. And for all attendees, please don't hesitate to turn on your screen. We have two ways to ask questions. You can ask by raising your digital hand and we will and unmuting yourselves, or you can just share your questions on the chat publicly or privately and we can read. So please let's first of all say thank you to this great presentation, and let's open the floor for any questions that you may have. And,
hola, Bárbara. Great to see you.
Muy interesante.
Alberto, please go ahead.
Estás ahorita mute, Alberto.
Okay, I think we're now. Thank you very much, Francisco. This was a wonderful talk, and I'm very happy to see all what you presented. I have just a quick question. Can you talk a little bit about the fallow period that is needed to have the Milpa sort of operating at its optimal level or at that equilibrium level, and also sort of the population density that is required for that system to function? If you can say a little bit more about that, I'll appreciate that.
Yes, sorry, I missed your first question. There's something in the sound that.
The period of fallow, where before the burn, after the Milpa is in for a while, then they let the sort of like a well and the forest go back up, and then sort of burn it again. So as I understand, that's sort of part of the install. But I was just curious about that.
Okay, see if I understood your question. Yes, when we talk about slash and burn agriculture, which is the system that we use in the Yucatan Peninsula for the Milpa, we're talking about a period after the slash. We call it rosa and tumba. Slash doesn't reflect actually the whole process. Slash doesn't actually, as I understand it, doesn't actually mean that we have to chop down trees. Actually, trees, which are 20, 25, 30 meters high, and maybe 50, 60 centimeters in diameter. So when they have to cut the trees, they cut it at about 120, 130 meters high to speed the recovery of those trees. They also don't chop all the trees. They leave some trees that they know that they can withstand the fire, and actually the fire triggers processes in the physiology of those trees that lead to flowering and seed to repopulate again faster the area. And then they have 3-4 years. I've seen areas up to 5 years actually of farming, because the soil is in such a good condition that they can farm up to 5 years. Usually it's 2 to 3 years. And then they leave the area to recover for 15, 20, 25 years. The area that a farmer works it's about 2 to 3 hectares. It's that could yield when the good years of the milpa back in 20 years, not too long ago, a good milpa under those good conditions could yield around 3,000 kilograms of corn per hectare. Back then, that was it's a large quantity to feed the population of the community, of the family first, and then the community, and to sell it to other communities. Today, the main challenge that the milpas have and is in the plan presented to FAO is that the traditional systems of milpa are yielding no more than 1,500 kilograms per hectare. And in most cases, it goes way below that, below 50%, even less than 50% of that. 400, 500 kilos of corn, of maize per hectare. That is not enough for a family to live the whole year. And a family size is at least 5 to 10 people in a family. Right now, there is corn coming from the outside, from government, most likely GMO corn coming to the community. It's we did a survey, and we found out that about 70% of the farms now of the milpas are incorporating fertilizers or herbicides or insecticides and so on, and the number of years where they leave the forest to recover after the last season of corn is getting shortened as well, and mostly because of public policy that because they don't want the forest to be cut because of the carbon sequestration, stuff like that. Then it's making the farmers to reduce the number of years of recovery. Was that enough answer, or should I dig into more of the question?
No. Thank you very much. That was very useful. I think there are others who have comments or questions.
And the other aspect is the dynamic equilibrium. Dynamic equilibrium is an ecological concept that came up after thinking that ecosystems reach a period of stability. It turns out that no, in the forest, by naturally a tree falls and within there opens gaps, and there is a new process of succession there, blah blah. So it's dynamic. It's a dynamic equilibrium, but there is a way in which we can find limits above and below, and everything moves around those between those limits. So it's called dynamic equilibrium. When things go beyond, for instance, a hurricane, the system can go below or break those boundaries. But if the system is resilient enough, they will go bounce back again and keep within those limits and remains. This whole process takes a long of time, a lot of many years, but that's what we consider sustainability when we talk about the milpa system in the Yucatan. Now, when these limits are broken, usually for bad policies or like stopping the use of fires, then the whole system starts to collapse. That's where we get reduce our yields and so on, and that's where the government comes in and brings elements that are not from the culture, like hybrid seeds, like herbicides and so on, and create more difficulties here. And because of that, now governments are looking back and say, what is it that we're doing wrong? And what is it that we have to learn from the past so we can transform our broken systems to a more sustainable one? That's the idea of the dynamic equilibrium. It's also present in the milk. Thank you for your question. Anabel, ¿cómo estás?
¿Cómo puedo? Ahí está. I like the model that talks about the pressures at the end, and that's something, you give it what substitution and the pressures and what the challenges we have now, because of course those pressures, the substitutions are really devastating in all manners. But I had two, and of course, I want to I have lots of questions, but I had one comment about the concept of fallow. I reject the concept of fallow completely. It's a word that means a unseeded plowed field. So if we're going to bring Western Euro-American thoughts to it, fallow makes us think that all the land that is not in a crop, in the Milpa, as you talk it, or the Ishkol, is useless. And that has really promulgated a super misunderstanding. That's why I use the concept of Milpa forest garden, because it's integrated and it's an asynchronous clearing of a field with all those wonderful things, you were saying, favoring trees, cutting trees, that is essentially coppicing. People do not think we cut trees, then we build a house. They cut trees and resprout for the next house. So those are really my comments. I do not want to hear fallow. Like arable, arable means plowable. So when I hope FAO, we can get them to really understand that we're looking at cultivable, not arable. We're looking at a dynamic cycle of land use that requires regeneration. People talk about, why do they abandon the Milpa? Oh, it's the soil fertility, or it's competition with weeds. No, it is encouraging and selecting the things that are going to be the perennial crops in the subsequent years. So if you model a 20-year cycle, it's 20%, only 1/5 of the land will ever be in Milpa, and it's asynchronous. And then also the fire. We're in North, I come from California. Fires are really threatening, so we don't like fire. But fire as a tool, which was, of course, all the Americas. We have 10, 12,000 years of occupation or more, where all they used was observation, skill, labor, and fire, stone. So we have to really look at Mesoamerica, the Maya, all the Americas in a very different light when we talk about land use. It's an intimate. You mentioned all the 50 crops in the field and all the things that are as we call them volunteers, but actually my master forest gardeners call them recommendations. And you have to take the recommendation or not. If you use a weed whacker, you don't hear the recommendation. Anyway, I could go on, but thank you very much. I look forward to following up, and maybe we can actually take some of those concepts and build it. What about a Milpa Forest Garden UNESCO intangible heritage that goes beyond this concept? Since you have isolated the FAO as just looking at the field, what about the system? And that's where that traditional knowledge is really, I don't think it can be lost if people are looking at the forest garden component, but those pressures you're talking, I'd like to think more about those. But anyway, take it over.
Beautiful, Annabelle. And that brings me to the definition of its call. As I mentioned earlier, Milpa is a word that comes from the Nahuatl, from the Aztecs. It's not a Maya term.
Yeah, it's Milipan. But excuse me, I just want to mention too, that's really important, because it's promulgated by the colonial powers who wanted to find, they said, okay, this is a maize field. What do you call it? Oh, it's my Milipan. They contracted it to Milpa, but Milipan just means cultivated place. So if you asked an Aztec person to take me to a Milipan, you could be going to an orchard. So they misunderstood it from the get-go.
Yes, but whereas each call means each is translated as fruit. Whole is the result of the work that I do with my natural resources. And that means
so it could be the whole Milpa cycle.
Not only that, but also the connection with the forest. There is this beautiful work that shows, you probably know it, that milpas are biogeographical areas, islands. And there is a given area of a milpa, where you expand that area, the colonization, the growth doesn't happen as good as if you keep within the boundaries of the biogeographical island. So there is a lot of knowledge there. They had to, experiment sizes of how much land I should clear for my each call, so that I can speed up the growth of the forest. And there is another work that was done in the Amazon. They were trying to stop the burning in the Amazon for agricultural practices. But they did this research and found out that when it's properly managed, the succession process after the burning, it turns out that the succession process of succession of forest captures much more carbon than the carbon that was released into the environment because of the burning. So we always have net gain, but when these things get out of hand, now the Amazon is going below net gain. Now they are releasing more carbon than what they are capturing. We are in difficulties now because of not understanding the ecology of fire.
Excellent. Thank you. Those comments and questions enrich a lot the conversation. I would like to open the floor for students. Don't be shy. This is a great opportunity to learn from an excellent teacher. And while you're thinking and formulating, remember you can use any way to share your questions. If you don't want to use the microphone, the chat is always valid. But any other questions here? We still have a time for, depending on the complexity of the question, for a few more. So let's see. And Barbara, you can go ahead while we wait for the...
Preguntas en español también son bienvenidas.
Sí,
Mucho gusto, Vanessa. Nip hola too.
Maybe I should wait a minute and see if there's students who are waiting to say something.
I think you go ahead and I'll keep monitoring the chat and the hands. Thank you.
Well, Francisco, when you were speaking about the different systems around the world that might have principles in common, you may have said what they are or what you think they might be, but I'd be curious to know what the principles are that you think go beyond Maya, Milpa, or Ixchol, to other parts of the other regions of the world that also have systems that are working according to the principles that you're describing. So do you have ideas of what are the principles in common around the world?
Thank you. That's a great question, Barbara. Thank you for asking. Yeah, the first one that is very apparent when you go and see these areas in different biomes, the first one that sticks out is diversity. It's and I agree with the definition of diversity from FAO, which includes the diversity of species of not only plants, but also insects, animals. And it turns out that the article that I showed that when corn screams, beans respond, the implication for policy there is do not encourage, at least in small farm systems, government do not encourage monocropping, encourage polycropping. And that is a big change if a policy of that kind is results of these discussions. That will be great. That's one thing. The other thing that comes when you visit these different areas is how decisions are made in regards to the management. And it's not a unilateral decision, it's a horizontal decision. And there is a saying from both men and women. There is a saying from both authorities, local authorities and the farmers on who owns the land, what kind of work you can do on the land, what kind of crops can you plant on the land. I mean, if there is not this kind of governance, some people might bring GMOs into the area and create problems. So at least these two things, and maybe I can dig on a little bit into the concept of dynamic equilibrium as well present, because that thinking drives a lot of decisions, a lot of action in the design and management of the system. And at least these three ones are the ones that I have now clear. But I'm sure we can think of more of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. And Cata, go ahead, and then I see your hand, Annabelle, too. We'll give Cata a space.
So still waiting for students to come up with the questions. And my question, Francisco, also thank you so much for this great lecture. It's been a while. I wanted to hear, you know, how this recognition by FAO is going to be significant for what is happening, the processes of abandonment of Milpa, the doubts that people have if they should or should not grow it and engage. From the perspective, and you mentioned all these initiatives that you are actually part of with the co-creation of intercultural knowledge and engagement of the university in promoting Milpa, also Milpa producing more crops, more yield. But I would like you to reflect for a minute from the perspective of some random milpero in the Mayan area of Quintana Roo and Yucatan. How is it going to make a difference? You know, from the perspective of the people who are not maybe connected to the university, how is it going to affect them?
You know that we explored that question when we use tape as a methodology to figure out what is the agroecological performance of the systems, food systems in the area. And yes, they have concerns. The main one is that the knowledge is not passing on, not even as much as it should be, as it used to, but also the quality of it is being affected. And it's not just the knowledge of, you know, you have to, when you poke the land with your stick to throw some seeds there, it's not only that knowledge that they have to have, it's also the values behind that action. And the values behind that action are harder to pass on, especially in the new generations, because they are living in a faster speed of life, so to say. So that's one of the big concerns, the main concern. The second concern is the loss of varieties, the loss of the genetics of the genetic variety of the crops, because the ones that the seed keepers are dying. No one is taking the role of keeping the seed. And there are some organizations trying to do that, but they keep running into difficulties, like you can only preserve seeds for so long under these conditions. You have to have different conditions to preserve the seeds. And the best way that they used to preserve those seeds, those varieties, was planting them, reusing them. But if nobody is interested, or no more young generations working in agriculture, there is the number of planting of those varieties is declining. So those are the two things that are of big concern. At the university level, we can do not much about it. We can actually find out the population of pests, the economical threshold of some pests, identify weeds, and so on and so forth. But we are not strong enough to influence policy. That's what the key issue to me is lying. It's policy, the interface between policy and knowledge, not only policy and science, but policy and knowledge, is still missing a lot in our environment.
So you think that the recognition of Milpa as a heritage system by FAO is going to impact the regional policies.
We hope so. I mean, to have this agreement, the three governments of Quintana Roo, Yucatan, and Campeche had to sign. The discussion now is that there were different parties in power when this idea happened. Now there are different parties in power, and their interest is different. So it's sometimes it's interesting, sometimes it's frustrating. Activism and social organizations play a critical role in pushing for changes in policy. Well, the past government, we don't know about this new government that started yesterday. The past government actually banned the social organizations. NGOs were banned. Most of the NGOs disappeared in the last government. And only the big ones like UNDP or Agroecology Foundation for the Yucatan Peninsula are there, but those are the big ones. The small ones who used to do the groundwork, very seldom now. So we see this is a battle that has to have a political dimension, and there is some people doing the work. We'll see how it goes.
Thank you.
Annabelle.
Go ahead, Annabelle.
Okay, well, I was hoping you had a little more positive things, because I seem to be in the same place as Scott Fedek and of course our friend Steve Gleesman. But I take myself as a cheerful pessimist. I will pursue it as it's possible, but realize we're dealing with all those policies. We need something ground up, you know. We need it to be a sovereignty, not security. We need it to have, you know, somehow, and the independence. All the forest gardeners I know, and of course many of them are no longer with me or us, have talked about the independence they have as a forest gardener. And I think they don't have to do a timestamp, but they do have to know, you know, what parameters they have for cosecha and whatever. But I just wanted one thing to say. If you had asked, someone asked about what I call action for climate justice. What are the things that are common? I've looked at data from Philippines, you know, especially Hal Conklin, data from the Southeast Asia, from South Asia, from Assam, specifically from Sri Lanka. I'm a little weak, but there are some examples from West Africa. And the common ground in all of the systems, which are very much like the Milpa system, is they build soil fertility with that biochar. I'm very interested. I would like to know more about that data, that there's more in the ground than lost above ground, because that's one of the things that are now past. Did you know that Ron Nye died? I don't know if you know that Ron Nye died, but he was very interested in soil biochar. Also reducing erosion. The plants themselves hold back. My colleagues who are trying to do more regenerative agriculture in Nebraska say that the biggest export they have, and they get no credit for it, is soil. So if you are reducing erosion, having plants on the landscape, you're lowering temperature because of the shade, you're increasing conserving water, also for the plants on the cover. And of course, the one thing that you did say, biodiversity, absolutely. But I think those are the 5 things that make life on the planet livable now, past, and the future. And if we can manage to engage people on those critical things, UNDP you mentioned, UNEP, they're all saying we need to, you know, it's not just biodiversity, it's conserving water. All the things that are important in those sustainable development goals could be incorporated into the Milpa Forest Garden cycle. So thank you.
Thank you. Let me make a comment. When you started your intervention, you talk about food sovereignty. It turns out that the concept of food sovereignty is a Western construct. And we explore how do people in our Yucatec Maya people think of concepts that drive their thinking and their decisions and action. And of course, there are some concepts that are more embedded in the policies than others. And right now, if we look at the of the national policies in Mexico, they talk about food sovereignty. But 10 years ago, they talk about food security. And some years before, they talk about food sufficiency, and so on. Well, we started to think, we started to look for what is the thinking in the Yucatec Maya people about this concept. And we came up with this expression. Translated in English, it says, when I think of my farming, it took a lot of years to come up with this expression, I want to make sure that I can produce enough food to feed my family and animals and to share without having to depend on others like the government and without harming nature. When we analyze this expression, it shows that there is a combination of food security, food sufficiency, and food sovereignty. Because if you have food security, you can have food on your table, but you may not know where that food comes from and how it was produced. You can have food sovereignty, these are the arguments that we found in the field. You can have food sovereignty, but what happens when you are hit by a hurricane or by a fire? Where are you going to get the food? You can have food sufficiency, but doesn't necessarily mean that you are producing this food. You become dependent. So it's a combination of these three concepts that we found that drives a lot of the thinking, especially in the planning process. And that's where the farmers think about diversity. And that's, we have about the three sisters plus 40 other species that are edible on the same area. And that's how we have the need of having good governance, etc. So there is a thinking that we can find expressions of this kind that actually explains the design and management of systems. So when you break this kind of thinking, when you break this logic, this philosophy, then you start breaking and undermining the food system. And to actually acknowledge and not only acknowledge, but to make it happen, more people to understand it, we have to think of many other aspects like training. We are not good at training people in thinking. And of course, when you have indigenous peoples with good level of thinking, but in different ways of presenting their thinking, and if we don't have bridges between cultures, we have problems. The idea is how to build bridges between different ways of thinking.
That's very true. And it's a collective that those different people who are saying those things you were talking about, whereas the food bank, I remember hearing someone saying, oh, they lost all their corn. And I said, well, then, and the next year they say they're planting their corn. I said, well, what do you mean? I thought you lost your, oh no, Juan gave it to me, but it was the bigger community. So that's something we're losing too. But it's the community. So it's, minimizing risk and promoting long-term investments, but it's not at the individual level. It's the combination of all those individuals with that philosophy.
Thank you. We have one person who was waiting for a question. So if I get that, I will read it because we have one more minute. But while I receive the writing, I would like everyone to please at least unmute. If you don't need to be just to share your applause with Francisco, because there's so much food for thought that he provided that it's, I think we are left with a lot of thinking and a lot of reading to do. So Vanessa, did you have a question or just turning on to say goodbye or?
Sí, nomás quería saludar a Francisco. Saludos, muchísimas gracias por su presentación. Hachnip Olal. Y tengo comentarios y preguntas, pero yo sé que hay poco tiempo, pero muchas gracias.
Puedes escribirlas y los que se tengan que ir se quedan y yo puedo quedarme aquí un ratito más para responder esas. Por favor, que no se queden preguntas sin responder. Así que queda.
Me voy a tardar escribiéndolo.
Cora tiene una pregunta y la respuesta es sí, todos pesan igual, tienen el mismo valor, cada uno de los 5 criterios. Well, sorry. Sorry. Yes, the answer to Cora's question is that yes, each of the 5 criteria has the same weight. They all have to have the equal level of response. Sorry.
Thank you, Cora, for your question. And go ahead, Vanessa. You can, and everyone else, if you need to go, don't hesitate. Just post your messages, and Francisco will read them. And we can give a round of applause before everybody goes. Thank you so much. And go ahead, Vanessa. We can stay as long as needed.
Ay, muchas gracias. Francisco, y la pregunta, y sí platicó un poquito sobre esto, pero quería un poquito más de explicación o ejemplos en parte de cómo es que la milpa trabaja en conjunto con el bosque, porque entiendo que todo está conectado y se necesita todo, pero sí podría platicar un poquito más sobre eso, por ese tema. Por favor, gracias.
Sí, ¿hablamos español o inglés?
Is there still someone in the room who does not speak Spanish? Everyone in the room speaks Spanish?
Jody, si habla. Ali, ¿hablas español?
Ali sí, porque es una estudiante.
Entonces sí, todos hablamos español. Puedes dar-
Okay.
¿Mantenemos la grabación?
Ok.
Sí.
Bueno, gracias, Vanessa.
Gracias a usted.
Sí.
Y también disculpe, también lo último que le iba a decir, hacía la pregunta porque es algo de que me llamó la atención que Ángela comentó de que hay tanto bosque y hay mucho ese pensamiento de que no se está usando y se debe de usar y que desperdicio de que no lo están usando, pero no es así y me gustaría platicar un poquito sobre eso. Gracias.
Ok, con respecto a la primera pregunta, la herramienta científica que se ha usado mucho para explicar esta relación que hay entre un área dedicada al cultivo, en este caso la milpa, y la selva a su alrededor, se llama biografía, Island Bio... Ups. Ok,
Island biogeography,
la milpa,
right?
sí, Island Biogeography. O sea, la milpa es una isla y tenemos, mientras diferente sea el tamaño de la milpa, diferente es su comportamiento como isla. Entonces, hay experimentos que muestran, por ejemplo, que los animales que comen el elote, el maíz, en la milpa, tienen enemigos naturales que viven en la selva, alrededor de la milpa. Y si la distancia entre la orilla de la selva y el centro de la milpa, donde puede estar el animal, puede ser detectado por el enemigo natural, va a haber un control natural de ese animal comiendo. Ese es un ejemplo. Otro ejemplo es, si existen árboles, y no solamente árboles, sino arbustos y las primeras etapas de la sucesión primaria, que necesitan semilla y que por alguna razón el banco de semilla del área que fue quemada eliminó esas semillas, la vegetación que está cerca va a proveer la semilla para la recolonización. Y eso es por efecto de los pájaros, por efecto de los animales que llevan las semillas o por el efecto del viento. Entonces, el tamaño de la isla, de la milpa, depende de la facilidad del proceso de sucesión secundaria que se va a llevar a cabo en esa isla. Entonces, esta conexión también se refleja en el nombre maya, Ichkol. Kol es cierto, tengo mi cultivo, pero ese cultivo también depende de la selva, de la vegetación que tengo cerca. No debo de perder de vista esto. Por lo tanto, no debo exceder mi área de sembrado. Cuando nosotros hacemos un monocultivo grande, muchas hectáreas, 100, 50, 10 hectáreas es grande también. Entonces, la capacidad de protección de la vegetación que está alrededor disminuye enormemente y empiezan a incrementar, sobre todo si es monocultivo, empiezan a incrementar mis problemas y por lo tanto la dependencia para el uso de fertilizantes o insecticidas o fungicidas, etcétera, porque perdió la vinculación con el entorno natural. Esa es la primera parte de la pregunta. Y, perdón, olvidé la segunda parte.
La segunda parte del comentario, se me hace que Anabel había dicho de que por cuando llegué yo en abril a Yucatán y del avión sí se miran grandes,
Sí,
hay tanta selva y digo, qué lindo. Sí. Pero otras personas tienen diferente perspectiva de que, oh, wow, tenemos que cortar aquí, sí, construir y no se está usando la tierra, ¿verdad?
Sí, claro. Y recientemente una persona del Washington Post vino a hacer un reportaje sobre el impacto del turismo de Quintana Roo en la naturaleza. Y ella llegó en un vuelo que aterrizó en el aeropuerto de Tulum, es un aeropuerto recientemente abierto. Y dice, yo estaba viendo un océano, no un mar, un océano de verde. Entonces, ¿por qué dicen que hay un impacto negativo en el ambiente si yo veo un océano de selva, ¿no? Entonces, hay varias cosas que suceden allá. Hay efectos de microclima al modificar contornos sin estudiar bien las condiciones ecológicas. Hay efectos de microclima que con el tiempo van acumulando efectos negativos que va creciendo. Segundo, cuando hablamos de problemas globales, por ejemplo, cambio climático, si nosotros pensamos que tenemos un océano de selva, no deberíamos de tener el problema de cambio climático, de calentamiento global. Sin embargo, tenemos el calentamiento global. Es decir, aún con ese océano de selva, no tenemos suficiente vegetación para mitigar el efecto del calentamiento global. Solamente con este razonamiento lógico podemos decir, bueno, lo que necesitamos es entender y manejar mejor este recurso, porque si aún con este recurso tenemos el problema que tenemos, imagínate qué pasa si empezamos a reducir este recurso. ¿Qué está pasando? Eso pasó en la Amazonia de Brasil. Como explicaba, quizás mi inglés no fue suficiente. Bueno, en Brasil, aún con los efectos de la quema, que también ahí tiene agricultura de Rosado y quema, cuando la quema se hacía bien, la ganancia neta de carbono, de captura de carbono, era mayor que la pérdida de carbono por la quema. Es decir, la velocidad de recuperación de la vegetación era tal que en un corto tiempo no solamente se capturaba la misma cantidad de carbono que se quemó, sino que capturaba todavía más. Ahora, ese proceso ahorita se detuvo y en la Amazonia, con ese océano de verde, ahora está emitiendo más carbono de lo que captura. Tenemos problemas. Aún con 2 océanos de selva. Entonces, ¿qué me está diciendo? Que necesito entender mejor procesos ecológicos y necesito tener un principio de precaución para manejar mejor ese océano de selva.
Sí.
Sí, creo que al final nos queda esa lección de ver las escalas de tiempo, no solo ecológicas, sino que geológicas también para entender cómo son los procesos al final que están influenciando los sistemas alimentarios y también los sistemas sociales y políticos que están actuando. Muchísimas gracias, Francisco, por tu tiempo, Vanessa, por tus preguntas, a todos acá. Y creo que va a haber que seguir promoviendo estos sistemas. Creo que pones unos buenos puntos para reflexionar más allá de lo local, cuáles son como que las comunalidades con otras regiones y reforzar todo ese conocimiento ancestral relacionado con estos procesos agrícolas y ver qué comunalidades hay entre esas distintas regiones del mundo. Pero como marcaba ahí en el chat, creo que también hay como un sesgo cuando me puse a ver el listado de los lugares donde están estos sitios reconocidos. Tenés un montón en China, un montón en Corea, un montón en Japón. Los países que han puesto por lo general tienen más de uno y hay muchos lugares donde quizás, por ejemplo, Perú no tiene, bueno, Perú sí tiene uno, Bolivia. Entonces creo que vale la pena como promover que este tipo de investigación se haga en otros lugares y ver cuáles son esos elementos que se comparten para ir reforzándolos y compartiéndolos dentro de las universidades y con los productores para que tenga impacto, como decía la pregunta de Cata. Pero bueno, no, muchísimas gracias de nuevo por todo tu tiempo, por la increíble transmisión de conocimientos y a todos los que quedan aquí por su participación. Un fuerte abrazo.
Muchas gracias,
Sido
Francisco.
soy yo.
Gracias,
Muchísimas
Claudia.
gracias a ustedes. Un
Adiós.
abrazo.
Hasta pronto.
Adiós.
Nos vemos.
Dios.